Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I'm the Young Adult Librarian at the Rock Island Public Library, and the book I'm going to tell you about today is John Green's The Anthropocene Reviewed. So this is a nonfiction book. This is a book of essays, so I'm not going to be telling you about a plot like I normally would. But in this book, John Green reviews things on a 5-star scale, and they really run the gamut, from things like you get in the table of contents. I wouldn't say the full spectrum of human experience, but almost. You get humanity's temporal range, which he gives 4 stars, and you get Diet Dr. Pepper, which, is a pretty good thing that we've done so far. There's a lot of good quotes in this book. I'm going to just read some different parts because this is a book, it came out last year, and it started as a podcast. So if you've listened to any of the podcast episodes, you might be familiar with these essays. But also, John Green reads the audiobook. So, if you like his reading style, I do. It's, very good. And a lot of these, I will say, were written in 2020. So they have a certain vibe to them. For example, in the Humanities Temporal Range chapter, he writes about, how, basically, if you're familiar with John Green and his brother Hank, talks about, after my kids' school closed, and after I'd found a mask that I bought years earlier to minimize sawdust inhalation while building their treehouse, but long before I understood the scope of the pandemic, I called my brother Hank and told him I was feeling frightened. Hank is the level-headed one, the sane one, the calm one. He always has been. We have never let the fact of my being older get in the way of Hank being the wise older brother. Ever since we were little, one of the ways I've managed my anxiety is by looking to him. My brain cannot reliably report to me whether a perceived threat is really real, and so I look at Hank, and I see that he's not panicked, and I tell myself that I'm okay. If anything were truly wrong, Hank wouldn't be able to portray such calm confidence. So I told Hank I was scared. The species will survive this, he answered, a little hitch in his voice. The species will survive this? That's all you've got for me? He paused. I could hear the tremble in his breath, the tremble he's been hearing in my breath our whole lives. That's what I've got for you, he said after a moment. I told Hank I'd bought 60 cans of Diet Dr. Pepper so that I could drink 2 for each day of the lockdown. And only then could I hear the old smile, the my older brother really is a piece of work smile. For someone who has spent 4 decades worrying about disease pandemics, he said, you sure don't know how disease pandemics work. And yeah, obviously, that chapter hits a little bit different in 2022. Oh, Diet Dr. Pepper also gets 4 stars, in case you were wondering. I had to kind of flip through. Chapter after that, Velociraptors. They get 3 stars, which, yeah, that seems fair. There's movie Velociraptors and then there's real ones, and, there's quite a bit of difference between the two. Canada geese only get 2 stars, which, yeah, they're amazingly suited to live alongside humans, but they certainly aren't always the most fun bird to coexist with. A lot of these essays, are really, kind of moving examinations of, larger human issues and experiences within, the lens, or, by looking at one thing, by looking, at whatever subject he's reviewing in that essay. So this is my favorite book of the last year, and it really gets into the idea that in the Anthropocene era, there are no spectators. We are all participants. We are all helping to create the reality in which we live, if only in small ways. So in the essay about Auld Lang Syne, he writes about his friend Amy Cross Rosenthal. She asked, are you a writer? And he said, I was trying to be, and she asked if I had anything that was 2 minutes long that might work on the radio. So this was kind of a beginning for him. The song Auld Lang Syne, though, this is an old song. It's we kind of trace the modern version to 1788, to the Scottish poet Robert Burns. Amy Cross Rosenthal, though, this is another quote from the book. In her public appearances, Amy would sometimes use that recursive lament of British soldiers and transform it without ever changing the tune or the words. She would ask an audience to sing that song with her. Okay, but here changing the words. And if you've seen John and Hank Green live, you might have seen this too. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. And although it's a profoundly nihilistic song written about the modernist hell of repetition, singing this song with Amy, I could always see the hope in it. It became a statement that we are here, meaning that we are together and not alone. And it's also a statement that we exist. And it's a statement that we are here, that a series of astonishing unlikelihoods has made us possible and here possible. We might never know why we are here, but we can still proclaim in hope that we are here. I don't think such hope is foolish or idealistic or misguided. We live in hope that life will get better, and more importantly, that it will go on, that love will survive even though we will not. And between now and then, we are here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. So Auld Lang Syne gets 5 stars. Also in this book, talks about Googling strangers, and I believe this gets 4 stars. And yes, even the city of Indianapolis does, which once, when John Green writes about, you can kind of see, like, okay, I visited this place, and maybe that wouldn't have been my first instinct, but when he describes it, you can kind of see through his eyes, like, oh, all right, there's more to this than meets the eye initially. Also, we have the QWERTY keyboard, and sort of the invention of that. 4 stars, it's certainly something. The Mountain Goats, the band, of course, they're famously do, like, there's a chorus that I love very much, and it is simply, I'm going to make it through this year if it kills me, which, sad to say, has been increasingly relevant for the past several years, but it's a good one. Diet Dr. Pepper is, if you want something sweet, if you want a soda experience without the sugar, there you go. One of my favorites, the last one I'll read a little excerpt from, is The World's Largest Ball of Paint. Now this is, it's something where, over 40 years, it started as a baseball. Now, there are more than 26,000 layers of paint on that baseball. It weighs 2.5 tons. It has its own little house, and every year, more than 1,000 strangers show up to add layers of paint to it. The whole thing is free to visit. Mike even provides the paint. He and his son both still add layers, but most of the painting is done by visitors. So yeah, this started in 1977, and it's become this roadside attraction. And John Green, like, he writes about this in the context of making things and how we think and feel about the things we make. We try and make things that maybe reach other people or have meaning to us, and how that can be a challenge, how to connect with other people through art. But then he writes, I've often wished, especially when I was younger, that my work was better, that it rose to the level of genius, that I could write well enough to make something worth remembering. But I think that way of imagining art might make individuals too important. Maybe in the end, art and life are more like the world's largest ball of paint. You carefully choose your colors, and then you add your layer as best you can. In time, it gets painted over. The ball gets painted again and again until there is no visible remnant of your paint. And eventually, maybe nobody knows about it, except for you. But that doesn't mean your layer of paint is irrelevant or a failure. You have permanently, if slightly, changed the larger sphere. You've made it more beautiful and more interesting. The world's largest ball of paint looks nothing like the baseball it used to be, and you're part of the reason. So, it's a really lovely book. If you like audiobooks especially, I would recommend that version. But yeah, you'll get to read essays on many, many different subjects, and yeah, just kind of celebrate the world as it is, or this current era, the Anthropocene, and the things humans have made, the things we've done, and how many of them, well, not so great. Some of them are, I'm glad they exist. I'm glad that this book exists, so in the spirit in which it was written, I give it 5 stars. And thank you for watching. I will see you again soon.